Good day all and welcome to another video. Yes, South Africa is sitting in the dark for various amounts of times these days. It is becoming the norm to experience these power outages on a daily basis. Since the local power utility has been drained of funds through corruption and fraud, it seems to have lost its ability to provide sufficient power for the country. This utility is not only providing power to its own citizens, but exporting a big portion of its power generation capacity to 7 other countries in the SADC region. While the current outages are being blamed on the loss of the supply from the Cabasa hydropower plant in Mozambique, it is not the only problem that is causing the current problems for the residents of the country. While the loss of about 1 gigawatt of power supply from Mozambique should not have such a major effect on South Africa's ability to produce power to power its own industries, it is being used as the reason for the outages. While the locals suffer from the outages now on a regular basis, sometimes up to 4 hours per session per day, and sometimes 4 sessions a day, the utility carries on with its plans to try and replace the up to 3,000 white employees it is retrenching due to its broad-based black empowerment and affirmative action policies. We also have verified information as indicated in the video that is attached. The following facts. South Africa is out of diesel that it uses to power the emergency generating stations. Pumped storage dams are low and need to be replenished. No power from Mozambique as mentioned earlier. 5,000 megawatt, that is 8 power generation units, are down due to boiler tube leaks. There are 3 units that are running below capacity because of boiler tube leaks. There are also other unplanned outages that apparently also occurred, reducing the effectiveness of the utility to provide sufficient power to keep the outages to a minimum. Have a look at what was discussed on one of the local news channels.
Well, Eskom has announced that it will implement stage 4 load shedding in less than an hour. It starts at 9 this morning. South Africans experience darkness for over 4 hours at a time at the weekend, sometimes twice in one day. The latest blackouts have been attributed to loss of power imported from cyclone-hit Mozambique. Our reporter Aviwe Mtila is outside Megawatt Park. Aviwe, a very good morning to you. So, yeah, less than an hour till the next round begins. And I suppose many people, including unions, have their own concerns about this.
Well, certainly, Yuveka, as I understand at this moment, there is already a load shedding from the previous night. We're undergoing stage 2. At 9 o'clock, we're expecting stage 4 to kick off with expected dent to the economy, of course, of about 4 billion rands that the economy will suffer per day that stage 4 load shedding is had. Of course, this is frustrating to many South Africans, and as you look through the social media pages, you'll get the frustrations there with one lady complaining of over 8 hours that she experienced offloads, off blackouts essentially, and another saying that this is officially a potoi. But I'm joined now by one of the union leaders, Zwelinzi Mavavu, just to unpack what he's hearing from the workers that he represents. Mr. Vavic, thank you for joining us here at ENCA. But what have you been hearing from the workers you represent over the weekend?
Well, people are very angry. People have stopped believing the government. And workers are completely rejecting the apology that the president was offering to the country yesterday. People are tired of hearing the same thing. Task team upon task team, we are intervening. Minister, deputy president is intervening. We've stopped listening to all of that. We think that it is just a load of nonsense. People are fearing that they are going to lose their jobs. I mean, if you keep on shutting down the economy, because that's what a 4-hour rolling blackout means. You shut the economy 4 hours in intervals throughout the day. And then there's no wonder that our people are thinking that we're losing 4 billion rands a day. Just imagine the impact of that on an economy that is already depressed, an economy that have already been put on stagnation thanks to the world economic crisis in 2009. And that crisis has been going on and deeper. We're no longer having words to describe what is happening. I mean, we've used catastrophe in the past. We've said double catastrophe. We just don't know what to say anymore. But People are in the trains as we are sitting. Trains are not on time. The trains are losing signals. People are using the manual signaling. Workers are dying as a result of those accidents. It's a very, very dark hour for South Africa.
And then just as unions, are you getting any word from Eskom as to when this will be remedied?
Well, we know is exactly what workers in the rest of the economy know, what we keep on hearing from Parliament, from the President, from the Deputy President, from the Minister of Public Enterprise, and other ministers, all of them saying that we are working on this crisis. But the reality is that from 2002, the country have been going through this load shedding. Up to now, they can't find a solution. And the only reason we believe why this is so is because we don't think that they have correct skill set inside Eskom. We don't think that they have a leadership that have a know-how of how a electricity generating company should be run. We think that the whole issue of deploying people here have been absolutely done wrongly, and people, as a result, the economy is suffering as a result of that.
Well, that was Saftu Zwelinzima Vavi, being critical, of course, to the embattled power utility, saying that we've heard these many meetings have been ongoing. We've heard excuses upon excuses, but now we need tangible results. He's also fearing a jobs bloodbath that could actually happen with this ongoing scourges of load shedding.
All right, thanks very much, Abiwe Mtila outside Megawatt Park. Let's continue that discussion. Eskom saying it's working with technicians in Mozambique to restore power supply. Storms in the country, as we know, resulting in 2 power lines going offline, cutting about 1,000 megawatts of power from the grid in South Africa. The power utility, like we say, implementing load shedding from 9 o'clock. That's less than an hour to go. And the parastatal says, though, that this should not raise any alarms. In studio this morning, we're joined by energy analyst Chris Yelland to get an analysis of where we are at the moment. Chris, another week, another chat about load shedding. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes.
So you've warned, from what I see here, that that for us to have had load shedding, of caution, for us to have had load shedding at the weekend means that there really is a serious problem. We are in a crisis, but the problem is much more than what's happening in Mozambique at the moment.
That's right. In Mozambique, as your clip said, we've lost about 1,000 megawatts as a result of 2 lines being down from the cyclone. 1,000 megawatts is not insignificant, but it's very little, in fact, compared to, for example, 5,000 megawatts of power that is down as a result of boiler tube leaks, as well as 2,000 megawatts of emergency generation capacity that's not available because Eskom doesn't have diesel stocks after running these very hard for a while. And then, of course, there are other problems at Medupi and Kusile and random breakdowns within the coal fleet. So, yes, while 1,000 megawatts is significant, it's by no means the biggest part of the problem.
But there are some short-term solutions to load shedding that. And would they save us from where we are this morning with stage 4 load shedding yet again?
Well, we've got to look to short-term interventions, medium-term and longer-term interventions. When I talk short-term, I'm talking about 6 months to a year. The very short-term, like as in now, is about trying to restore diesel stocks. It's about trying to restore the power lines from Mozambique. It's like trying to improve the availability of existing generation capacity, which is broken down. Those are the quickest wins. Not that they're easy, but that's what can solve things within a week or 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. When we look to 6 months to a year, we're looking at small-scale embedded generation. In other words, really unlocking the potential of customers to become part of the solution by installing their own small-scale embedded generation on their premises to relieve Eskom of the burden. This can be done quickly, and also it is done at the cost of the customer, not at the cost of government, but there are regulations at the moment which we're waiting for and which are holding up the rollout of small-scale embedded generation.
Now, Chris, when we hear about this, and the conspiracy theorists among us want to go, yes, there's something they're not telling us, we don't really believe them, there's other things, and they're covering up for the corruption, and this is the price we're paying. But I would like to think that with an election that's coming up, and we see the president on a campaign trail this morning again, that you would want to fix this. Say, look, we're a government that can fix these things. So do you really believe that, yes, this is stuff that's beyond their control, and are they doing everything that they can?
I have no doubt that that government, the Department of Public Enterprises, the Department of Energy, Eskom's management and staff want desperately to get things back on track. I don't believe the conspiracy theories that this is a deliberate attempt for nefarious purposes. I do believe, though, that productivity and morale at Eskom is very low, and that people throughout Eskom on the floor at power stations are not giving of their best. Their morale is low. They're fearful of jobs. They're fearful of the future. And this has a debilitating effect on giving of their best. There's also a lot of public outrage towards Eskom, which must be very difficult for people within the organization to bear. It was a once proud organization that has really been brought to its knees.
So would you say then, because we're seeing it's a different problem every month, is another explanation? It's supplies here, then it's infrastructure, then it's like units that are just falling apart. Are you saying that morale, that state of mind is not, they're not fixing these things, or they don't actually want to go, or even if they are, they're not making sure that the job is 100% done? Can we just speak in simple terms like that?
In simple terms, it's a question, I think, of poor morale and poor productivity as a result of the negativity surrounding Eskom and the uncertainty of the future. And I think that does play a role, but that is something, I think, that is different to the word sabotage. Sabotage is, in my mind, has a much different meaning to what I've just described.
So surely, the powers that be at Eskom, no pun intended actually, are aware of this. And you would imagine that they would want to do something about it, being, like you say, the recipient of so much anger.
Well, I've spoken to the COO of Eskom, and he has indicated to me that the biggest thing on his mind, the thing that keeps him awake at night, are people issues. Getting the right skills to the right place at the right time. Eskom is heavily overstaffed, but not necessarily with the right people. There is at the moment a moratorium on employment at Eskom, and this is adding to the frustration of the Eskom COO, who is wanting to put the right people, employ the right people and put them in the right place, but his hands are tied. And I think this is something that has been discussed at the board meeting with the minister this weekend, and Eskom has been given a freer hand now to put the right people in the right place.
Let's cross our fingers. Thank you very much, Chris Yeland, energy analyst there, just explaining the behind-the-scenes workings here, where we find ourselves at load shedding in Eskom at the moment.
Now there are some other issues with the power utility that can add to the woes that plague the country at the moment. It is speculated and yet unverified that there is also an attempt by some union members to sabotage those units that are still producing some power to the national grid. While all this is going on, the politicians and board members claim that they are on top of the situation. Well, if they were on top of the situation, South Africa would not be having these power outages. There is talk among the people in the know that the government might call these power outages a national disaster that could lead to a national emergency being called out by the president of the country. I had a look at the stages of the load shedding over the last couple of weeks, and initially the stages went only to stage 4, that is just prior to the total collapse of the national utility grid. But when I looked at the same website, they have now included the ability to go to stage 8 of load shedding. One question that we need to ask about these two multi-billion rand power stations that were supposedly to be the salvation of South Africa's power woes, were the contracts drafted by people with only a grade 3 education. The reason a cost for the power station is established and a completion date should be in the contract. But now the cost runs over 300% over budget, and in both cases produce about 50% capacity, as they are still not complete 7 years after they were supposed to have been commissioned. But there is a solution to the current problem, and the Democratic Alliance, one of the parties in the government of South Africa, suggested that the government fast-track the agreements with the independent power producers. This is after the government power utility cancelled all contracts with the independent power producers. All types of excuses were given after the cancellation of these contracts, and now the residents of the country is paying the price for the incompetence of the senior management of the power utility. The corruption and looting of the state-owned enterprise is going on even when there is an investigation going on into the state capture by private and corporate entities. The main problem with all these inquiries, that cost the taxpayers millions, do not have any teeth, and the implicated public and private servants just keep on in their employ and carry on as if they have done nothing wrong. When these inquiries eventually conclude, there might be a different investigation by the public prosecuting authority that might take anything from 2 to 10 years before they decide if they will prosecute these individuals that are causing the current issues within the power utility now. By the time many of these implicated individuals might face all kinds of charges, the country would have been in total ruins for at least a decade, and most of these implicated people would be living it up in countries outside of South Africa, where they will be living off the ill-gotten gains that made the rest of their fellow countrymen suffer. But back to the current power problems. There are also rumors that all this is politically motivated plot by the African National Congress to enable them to cancel the 2019 elections that are supposed to happen on the 8th of May 2019. Because all their sins are now being exposed in public, they would be losing a lot of support among their own supporters. And because of this fact, they cannot afford to run the election because they will lose control of the government. If by some miracle they maintain their majority status in the South African parliament, the country will revert to worse status than its neighbor Zimbabwe. Another rumor that is doing the rounds is that some affiliate of the African National Congress advised their members to stock up on supplies before the end of this coming weekend, things like water, canned food, fuel and cooking gas, as they anticipate that the national utility will be dead and buried after the weekend. This is as of yet unverified. But should this happen, the reboot of the grid could take a couple of weeks to several months to happen, and this will be the death of the country. It is also rumored that the radicals like the economic freedom fighters and Black First Land First would use this outage to invade farms and urban areas en masse and take over residences and land as they please without the occupants being able to call for help due to the communication system being down. South Africa is facing a dark future should all these rumors become reality, as many would be dead and either starving because of the problem of food distribution due to the lack of fuel. To put it mildly, South Africa is facing a major catastrophe, and the public might be greatly affected, especially those that have nowhere to go to get food and water. We must just pray that these people that caused all these problems at the national power utility would be prosecuted, and that there is some way to save the country from total destruction while the politicians and cadres sit in other countries sipping their champagne. Just on a final note, we have just been informed that the South African national grid might be down for 6 hours on the 21st of March 2019 from 6 in the morning till 12 in the afternoon. This was received via a WhatsApp message. Just to let everybody know.